Welcome to the channel, everyone. We're so glad you're here today for another amazing story. As we dive into today's tale, make sure to leave a comment and let us know where you're watching from. It's always exciting to hear from viewers around the world. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. We've got some incredible content lined up just for you, and trust me, you'll want to be here for tomorrow's special story. Now, let's get started. He guarded more than the Pope. The hidden truth. He must protect Captain. Elias Hartman had spent nearly 2 decades serving as a Swiss guard, each year reinforcing his unwavering loyalty and dedication to the Vatican. His life had been one of service, marked by rigid discipline and an absolute devotion to his duty, always watching, always protecting, but never questioning. The routine of his life was predictable, but it was in the quiet moments of reflection that Elias found himself contemplating the deeper purpose of his existence. What did it truly mean to serve the Church? One evening, as the sun set over the vast Vatican gardens, Elias was summoned to a private audience with Pope Francis. The guards had been given a rare opportunity to witness a moment in the Pope's inner sanctum. This wasn't an ordinary briefing about security protocols or ceremonial duties. It was something far more personal. Pope Francis, known for his wisdom and compassion, was ready to entrust Elias with something significant. As the door to the Pope's private study creaked open, the air felt heavy, laden with anticipation. Pope Francis motioned for Elias to sit beside him, an uncharacteristic warmth in his gaze. "Elias," the Pope began, his voice calm but firm, "I have a task for you. It's not one of the usual protection or ceremonial duties you are accustomed to. This is different." The Pope placed a small, unmarked wooden box on the table between them, and Elias noticed that the Pope's hands were slightly trembling as he pushed it forward. Inside the box, carefully wrapped in delicate velvet cloth, was a manuscript, an old handwritten document with ink faded by time, yet the words were clear, almost prophetic in their content. Elias felt a strange sensation in his chest, a mix of curiosity and awe. The Pope's eyes met his, and for a moment, the world outside the room seemed to disappear. "This manuscript," Pope Francis continued, "contains my vision for the future, the Church. It's a message meant to guide the leaders of the Vatican and future generations of the faithful, but it is not yet time to reveal it." The Pope paused, allowing the weight of his words to sink in. Elias, always the dutiful soldier, simply nodded. He understood his role, to protect, to guard, to serve. But this was something different, something that transcended mere physical protection. "I entrust this manuscript to you, Elias, because you have served the Vatican with the utmost loyalty. I trust that you will guard it as you would your own soul." Pope Francis's voice softened, a subtle sadness behind his words. "This message will change the course of the Church, but it must wait. It must be kept secret, hidden until the time is right." Elias was silent for a moment, staring at the manuscript. He could feel the burden of responsibility heavy in his hands. The Pope was not asking him to protect a treasure or a piece of history. No, this was far more sacred. It was a legacy, a plan that could shape the future of the entire Church. The weight of this secret was unlike anything Elias had ever experienced. "Will you keep it safe, Elias?" the Pope asked, his voice unwavering, though his eyes carried the weight of years of service and sacrifice. With a deep breath, Elias made his pledge. "I will protect it with my life, Your Holiness. You have my word." The Pope smiled softly, his gaze filled with trust and gratitude. "I know I can rely on you. Just remember, this is not a burden to carry alone. In time, the message will find its way to those who are ready. For now, though, it is yours to guard." As Elias left the Pope's study that evening, the manuscript securely tucked under his arm, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just changed forever. He had always been a man of discipline, someone who followed orders without question. But now, he felt a stirring deep within him, a calling perhaps, one that went beyond his duty as a guard. The manuscript was not just a piece of papal wisdom. It was a beacon of change, a path that could lead to a new era for the Church, and Elias would be the silent protector of that change. In the weeks that followed, Elias kept the manuscript hidden, locked away in a private vault known only to him. The days passed with the usual flow of ceremonial duties, but Elias couldn't help but feel the weight of the secret. He was no longer just a soldier in uniform. He was now part of something far more significant, a guardian of the future of the Church. And as he stood at his post each day, watching over the Vatican with the same vigilance he had always known, Elias knew that one day the time would come for the Pope's message to be revealed. Until then, he would keep his word, silent, steadfast, and loyal. As the days passed, the weight of the manuscript's secret began to settle heavily on Captain Elias Hartman. The vault where he kept it was locked, but in his mind it was never truly secure. Every creak of the ancient floors beneath his boots, every whisper of the wind through the high Vatican windows, seemed to echo with the responsibility he carried. He was not just protecting the Pope, nor the Vatican's physical walls. No, Elias was now the guardian of something more precious, the very future of the Church, a future that had been shaped in the quiet corners of Pope Francis's mind. But the world was not still, and neither was the Vatican. Elias felt the tension growing as rumors of a reform within the Church began to swirl. Political powers both inside and outside the Vatican were already pushing for change, though they did not know what exactly that change would be. The Vatican was a pressure cooker, with forces pulling in all directions. As Elias made his rounds, his thoughts became consumed by what he was hiding. He was caught between duty and something much deeper, his own growing sense of moral responsibility. It was one afternoon during a routine security briefing that the tension finally boiled over. Elias, standing at attention in the Pope's presence, could feel the sharp eyes of his superiors on him. The subject was delicate. A meeting with high-ranking church officials was set to take place, and the political climate surrounding the meeting was becoming increasingly volatile. The reforms mentioned in the manuscript were clearly becoming a point of focus. The future of the Church was at stake. Elias's heart raced as he listened to the conversation unfold. The Vatican's political machinery was gearing up, the old guard pushing for the status quo, while the new voices, growing in number, were calling for something radically different. There was talk of a secret alliance forming, one that wanted to advance the Pope's progressive ideals. But there were whispers, too, of those who would do anything to prevent that change, to preserve the old power structures. It became clear to Elias that the message hidden in the manuscript had the potential to shatter everything. At that moment, the internal conflict he had been suppressing finally broke free. The dilemma was unavoidable. If the Pope's message were revealed, it would transform the Vatican and possibly the entire Catholic Church. But the powerful forces in the Vatican weren't prepared for this kind of shift. There would be opposition, some of it forceful, maybe even violent. Would Elias's duty to protect the Pope's vision of the future outweigh his duty to the Vatican's existing order? As the conversation reached a peak, Elias excused himself. His mind was spinning as he walked back to his quarters, the burden growing with each step. The manuscript, the Pope's final message, was meant for a future generation. But Elias was beginning to wonder whether that future was ready for it. The Pope's plan wasn't just about reforms, it was about a revolution within the Church itself. Would the world be ready for that revolution? Could the Vatican survive the change? Sitting alone in his quarters later that evening, Elias stared at the vault where the manuscript was kept. The silence of the Vatican seemed to grow louder, as if the very walls were holding their breath, waiting for him to make a choice. His heart weighed heavy in his chest. The Pope had entrusted him with something that went beyond his usual duty. It wasn't just about protecting the Pope's life anymore. It was about protecting the soul of the Church, and he knew that the truth hidden in that manuscript could change everything. Suddenly, Elias realized the magnitude of what he was holding. The moral weight of the manuscript wasn't just the Pope's secret to keep. It was his secret to guard now. As he carefully opened the vault, his fingers brushing the edges of the delicate parchment, Elias felt something shift deep within him. Was it his duty to preserve the tradition of the Church, to stand guard over the past, or was his true role to ensure the Church's survival in the future, even if it meant standing against the very establishment he had sworn to protect? As he closed the vault once more, Elias understood. Loyalty to the Pope was not just about following orders. It was about protecting his vision, even if it meant making the most difficult choice of his life. He stood tall, the weight of his decision heavy in his heart. This was no longer just about guarding a man. It was about guarding the Church's future, and the silent burden of carrying that truth had become Elias's duty. Captain Elias Hartman had always prided himself on his discipline. Years of service had taught him to stand watch without hesitation, to follow orders with precision, and to never question the directives he was given. The Vatican's strict protocols were his guide, and he had faithfully adhered to them without fail. But after the discovery of Pope Francis's hidden manuscript, everything was starting to shift. Elias had kept the manuscript locked away, just as the Pope had requested. But as days turned into weeks, the pressure of keeping such a profound secret began to gnaw at him. He could no longer just stand guard at the gates protecting the Pope physically. The true weight of his responsibility now rested on his shoulders. He wasn't just a protector of the Pope's life, but the guardian of the Church's future, a future that the Pope had been shaping in secret. One evening, as the moonlight filtered through the ancient windows of the Vatican, Elias was called to the Pope's private study. There was a quiet intensity in the air. Something had shifted, and Elias could feel it. The Pope, ever calm and composed, motioned for him to sit. His eyes, however, told a different story. They carried the burden of knowing that the Church was standing on the edge of something monumental. "Elias," Pope Francis began, his voice steady but carrying a weight of something unspoken, "the time has come for you to hear the truth, the whole truth. You've been my guard for years, protecting me from threats both seen and unseen. But now, it's time for you to understand why you've been called to this duty beyond physical protection." Elias sat quietly, his heart racing in his chest. He knew this moment was coming. He had always believed that he was more than just a soldier, a mere instrument of protection. But what could the Pope want to say that would change everything he thought he knew about his role? "Do you remember when I entrusted you with the manuscript?" Pope Francis asked, his gaze piercing yet compassionate. "Yes, Your Holiness," Elias replied, nodding slightly, his voice betraying no emotion. "I've kept it safe just as you asked." The Pope smiled faintly. "You are loyal, Elias, and I've come to rely on your wisdom. But there is more to the message in that manuscript than you know. That manuscript is not just a future vision for the Church. It is a call to action, a sacred mission for those who are ready to embrace change." The words hit Elias like a wave. He had suspected the reforms outlined in the manuscript were monumental, but to hear the Pope speak of them so openly sent a jolt through him. Change. This was what Elias had been protecting all along, but he hadn't fully understood its magnitude. "Elias," Pope Francis continued, his voice softening, "you've always been a protector, but true protection is not just about guarding the Pope's life. It's about guarding the soul of the Church, the very spirit of its mission. The world is changing. The Church must change with it, or we risk becoming irrelevant, clinging to traditions that no longer serve the people." The weight of the Pope's words hung in the air. Elias had always been unquestionably loyal, but now he was being asked to understand the larger picture, to see his role not just as a guardian of tradition, but as a protector of something far greater. The Pope was calling him to be more than just a soldier. He was asking Elias to be a silent advocate for the change the Church needed. Pope Francis placed his hand on Elias's shoulder. "I am entrusting you with more than my safety, Elias. I I'm asking you to be a silent witness to this moment in history, to carry this message of transformation without ever revealing it. You must keep this secret for as long as necessary, for the world is not ready to hear it. But you will know, in your heart, what it means to protect not just the physical church, but its true mission. Elias felt the weight of the Pope's words settle deep in his chest. He had always served with honor, but now he was being asked to serve in a new way, to protect an idea, a future that might not come to pass in his lifetime, but one that could change the world forever. Your Holiness, I will do as you ask, Elias said, his voice steady but his mind racing. He had always believed in his duty, but now he understood that his duty was about more than obedience. It was about protecting the heart of the Church, even when the world around it resisted change. As he left the Pope's study, Elias felt a quiet transformation within himself. He had always been a man of duty, but now he was becoming a man of purpose. His loyalty was no longer just to the Pope's physical safety. It was to the mission of the Church itself, a mission that went beyond its walls, beyond its traditions. And in the silence of his duty, Elias knew that true service would require him to be both a protector and a silent witness to the future. Captain Elias Hartman stood at his post, his boots firmly planted on the cold, ancient stone of the Vatican courtyard. His eyes remained trained on the horizon, but his thoughts, for the first time in years, wandered. The manuscript hidden deep within the vault, the secret entrusted to him by Pope Francis, weighed heavily on his mind. It wasn't just the manuscript itself. It was what it represented. It was a future, a vision for a church that might never come to fruition in his lifetime. Elias had always understood his role as a Swiss guard, to protect, to guard, to be ever vigilant. But what he was guarding now wasn't just a man. It wasn't just the Pope. It was the very soul of the Church, a legacy that could change everything. The world around him continued, its rhythms uninterrupted. But Elias could no longer ignore the conflict burning inside him. Duty and devotion had always been the foundation of his life, but now it was something else, something deeper. The Pope's teachings had changed the way Elias viewed his role in the Vatican. Discipline, once his guiding star, now seemed like a cage, a structure that held him back from serving the greater good. His days were marked by routine, ceremonial duties, standing guard in silence, watching over the Holy Father. But now, Elias felt the walls of tradition closing in on him. Each day felt the same, his vigilance as sharp as ever, but his sense of purpose had been shaken. Elias's mind drifted back to the Pope's words. The true purpose of a guard is not simply to stand still, but to protect the mission of the Church no matter the cost. One evening, as the last of the visitors filtered out of the Vatican's hallowed halls, Elias found himself alone, sitting in his quarters, holding the manuscript in his hands once again. He had kept it locked away, just as the Pope had asked. But the message inside, the reforms, the vision for a future church, was something Elias could no longer ignore. He knew that the church, as it stood, was on the brink of change. The manuscript was not just a reflection of the Pope's thoughts, but a call to action, a blueprint for what the future of the church could be. Elias had always believed that to serve the church was to serve it in silence and discipline. But now, in the stillness of his room, that belief felt hollow. Could he continue to serve without acting? Could he remain the silent guardian when the Pope's vision demanded more than passive protection? His life had been built on sacrifice, but the question now was, how much of himself was he willing to sacrifice for the greater good? The following day, during a private meeting, the Pope's words rang in Elias's mind. He had been called to assist in a delicate matter, one that would test his loyalty in ways he had never anticipated. The Vatican, despite its outward tranquility, was in a state of quiet upheaval. Forces within the Church were resisting change. The political tension was palpable, and some, both inside and outside the Vatican, saw Pope Francis's reforms as a threat to their power. As the Pope confided in him, Elias realized that his loyalty had been tested in ways he hadn't fully understood before. The Pope was not asking for blind obedience. He was asking for Elias's service to a higher cause. He was asking Elias to not just guard his life, but to guard the spirit of the Church, even if it meant risking everything. "Elias," Pope Francis said, his voice steady but filled with quiet resolve, "sometimes the most faithful service is not in the silence we keep, but in the courage to speak when the truth must be heard. You are not just my protector. You are a protector of what the Church is meant to be." The words hit Elias like a wave. The Church was not just an institution. It was a living, breathing entity, and its survival depended on the willingness of those who served it to make sacrifices. Elias stood in the Pope's presence, feeling the weight of the decision he had to make. Duty had always meant guarding the Pope's body, ensuring his safety. But true service, the service the Pope was calling him to, was about something far greater. It was about protecting the Church's legacy, its future, and the faith that would carry it forward. To do so would mean stepping beyond the walls of discipline and embracing a new, more personal sacrifice. As he left the Pope's chambers that day, Elias understood his role had changed. He was no longer just a guard. He was a servant of the Church's true mission, even if that meant breaking with the past and risking his own future. His discipline would remain, but now it was guided by something deeper, the courage to act in the name of the Church's greater good. The path ahead wasn't clear, but Elias knew one thing: the sacrifice would be worth it. Not because he was following orders, but because he was following a higher calling. In that moment, Elias made a silent promise: to serve with not just discipline, but with heart and purpose. This was his true duty. Captain Elias Hartman's mind raced as he walked down the quiet, stone-cold corridors of the Vatican. The manuscript, the burden of the Pope's hidden vision, was still locked away, but Elias could feel its presence, its weight pressing on him. He had kept his promise to the Pope. He had guarded the future of the Church in silence. But the world outside was changing, and so was Elias. The days following the Pope's secret conversation had been marked by a growing tension within the Vatican. Powerful forces, some within the Church and some beyond it, began to push back against Pope Francis's vision of reform. The old guard of the Vatican, those who had clung to tradition and the status quo for generations, saw the Pope's radical ideas as a threat to their power. And in the shadows of the Vatican's towering walls, whispers of dissent and opposition grew louder. Elias had always stood firm in his loyalty, but now he was beginning to question whether his role as a protector of the Pope's physical safety was enough. His oath had always been clear: to stand guard, to ensure that the Pope's life remained safe from harm. But now, as the world seemed to inch closer to the brink of a crisis, Elias realized that the true battle was not just for the Pope's body, but for the soul of the Church itself. It was late one evening when the weight of that realization hit him hardest. The Pope had called him into his private chambers again, his face as calm and serene as ever, but Elias could see the weariness in his eyes. There was something in his gaze, a quiet plea that spoke of the heavy burden the Pope carried. "Elias," Pope Francis said softly, his voice barely above a whisper, "you have been loyal to me for years. Your service has been exemplary. But now, the time has come for you to make a choice. The reforms I've put in motion, the vision for the Church's future, it will not be easy. There will be those who will seek to stop it. They will not hesitate to use any means necessary. And I fear for the safety of the Church and of you." Elias stood at attention, his heart heavy. His loyalty had never been in question, but this was different. The choice the Pope was asking him to make wasn't about following orders anymore. It was about a sacrifice that could cost him everything. The Pope's eyes softened, and for the first time Elias saw the weight of the years in the Pope's face. "There are no guarantees in this, Elias. I ask you to protect something far greater than my life. I ask you to protect the very future of the Church. It's a duty that could come at a great cost, but it is a cost that must be paid. Elias's chest tightened. He had always been a protector, but now he was being asked to guard something intangible, the very future of faith, the essence of what the church could become. It wasn't just about his physical presence anymore. It was about embracing the change that Pope Francis had spoken of, even when it meant standing against the powers that be. "I understand, Your Holiness," Elias replied quietly, his voice steady, but there was a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "I have always been loyal to you. I will do whatever it takes to protect the church. But what if that means breaking my own vows? What if the cost is greater than I can bear?" The Pope placed a hand on Elias's shoulder, his gaze full of understanding. Sometimes true loyalty requires more than obedience. It requires us to sacrifice ourselves for the greater good. "You will be tested, Elias, but I trust you. And in your heart, you will know what is right." In that moment, Elias made his decision. His final oath wasn't just to protect the Pope's life. It was to protect the mission of the Church, no matter what it cost him personally. True loyalty meant standing for what was right, not what was easy. It meant embracing the Pope's vision, even when the world around them resisted. The following days felt like an endless storm, with the tensions within the Vatican rising. The old guard pushed their agenda harder, and those who believed in the Pope's reforms began to gather in secret. Elias felt the weight of the choice he had made pressing on him with every step. But as he stood at his post each day, his heart was clear. He wasn't just guarding the Pope's body, he was guarding the heart of the Church. And as the final silent hour approached, Elias knew that his oath had taken on new meaning. It wasn't about protecting the walls or the golden altars. It was about protecting the spirit of faith, the people who needed the Church to stand for them, no matter the cost. Elias's loyalty had become something more than just a duty. It had become a sacred calling. The future was uncertain, but Elias was ready. He would stand tall, not as a soldier of the past, but as a guardian of the future. And whatever the cost, he would keep his final oath to protect the Church no matter the price. We'd love to hear from you. What do you think of the story so far? Elias's journey is one of duty, loyalty, and personal sacrifice, but it also raises an important question. What does it really mean to serve with honor? As the story unfolds, Elias is faced with difficult choices that force him to reconcile his deep loyalty to the Pope with his growing understanding of the true mission of the Church. This internal struggle is something that many of us can relate to in our own lives, balancing personal beliefs and the demands of the world around us. Do you think Elias made the right decision by choosing to protect the Pope's vision for the future of the Church, even at the cost of his own personal sacrifice? What would you have done in his shoes? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We value every perspective, and your insights make these discussions even more meaningful. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon so you won't miss any of our future stories. We have some incredible content coming up that you won't want to miss. Thanks for being part of this journey with us, and we'll see you in the next video.